So again, welcome everybody. Thanks a lot for joining into the class today. Here's what we have planned for you this week. As I mentioned to you last week, we are working on the questions you guys developed from the masterclass sessions, and we're going to use that as a catalyst to go through logic information. So for those of you who were following along last week and used the question sheet that I gave you as a guide for the test, because the test was directly generated from the questions you guys actually asked. So yeah, the answer is I built the test and you guys built the questions and we answer them throughout the week. So we have some topics that we still didn't cover. I know Wawa was interested in flex pitch because Masterclass 2 actually had a couple of those things on there. So we're going to talk about that this week. And then next week, what we're going to do is actually start mastering. We're going to start the mastering lessons. We'll start with a little bit of Pro Tools mastering, and then we'll go into Logic mastering. So some of these questions, when it comes down to mastered file or raw mix like this one here, we're going to answer it, but we're not going to get into the details just yet because next week is all about mastering. And for those of you who just joined, again, more of you are coming in, which is awesome. There's no project this week. There is a quiz this week. So this masterclass question sheet will be up on the feed, the stream, and you can actually, you know what? How about I do that right now? And then that way you guys have a copy of it and you can type in notes to it throughout this week. So you have it for the test on Friday. These are the cues for master class 2. I might add a few questions to this, by the way. I don't think I got through everybody's, and there were still some that were being uploaded last week. So it's not a comprehensive list, nor am I putting everybody's question in there, to be honest with you. I have something from everybody so far, I believe, but I have not added every question that everyone has done. So let me just make sure I can make you guys a copy of this. There we go. Post that up. So there you go. If you wanted to download that really quick and type into it to answer the questions, basically these are the same questions that are going to be on the test on Friday. Again, just trying to help you out. So you have a resource, you have a guide, you have a review, you have everything with no surprises. And of course, yeah, we are still going to do questions based upon information that we cover here in the classes. So I can't stress how important it is to be here in these classes in order to do well in the quizzes. But again, quizzes are only 30%. It's the projects that really make the difference, and that's why I didn't assign another new project, because the last 2 or 3 projects we're going to do are pretty hefty. I want you to get caught up. I don't want you to be buried. So do yourself a favor and do what needs to get done. Beautiful weekend. All right. Again, welcome everybody. Monday morning is 10:17 on your radio dial. And we're going to go through the questions that you guys posed for masterclass number 2. And some of them are going to be a little repetitive, a little bit, but a lot of these actually are brand new based questions. And I actually read through these this weekend, and I brought with me today something to help answer some of these questions. Let me see if I can do this. Oh, hi. This is my beautiful Presonus. This guy is our controller. We talked about this as the single throw fader, as we call it, used for automation on the go. I enjoy this thoroughly. So when you have the fader port plugged in and you have all your automation information, so you see you have things like off, touch, write, read. You have some window views that you actually can use in Logic. Obviously, you have a record, solo, and mute. And down here, you have a transport control as well. So when this is plugged into the system, it actually, yeah, I look great, don't I? My beard's getting big. I have this plugged in, and using Logic, I can use it to control automation. And I'm only mentioning that because I see right here, question number 2 has to do automation with a controller. So I wanted to get into that today, and figuring that we didn't have the Avid artist control. I don't have one of those at my house. I do have a fader port though. we can use that. It's relatively the same functionality, same process, blah, 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 blah. So let's start with question number one. How can I get echo on my vocals? Well, we kind of already talked about this, as I mentioned, that there is a lot of different ways to do this. Echo to me is a timed effect. So when I get into my vocal channel here and I push play, and I don't push play and I can't hear it because I have again, my input and output not right. So my output has to be, nope, my output has to be, and my input has to be in, applying those changes. There we go. And then you're going to hear this. Oh. So here it is. Well, that's because we had a vocal transformation. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. So there we go. So there's my vocals, right? As you can see on the channel strip here, I have an EQ and a compressor. One of the questions I saw came up, why do you put an EQ in if you're not going to use it? I mentioned that. You always should have it on there, even if you're not going to use it, because you might use it. And you don't want to have to then rearrange plugins on your signal chain later. Meaning to say, let's say I built this whole thing here, like all these things here, and then realize, crap, I need an EQ. Well, now you got to move these down one by one, by one, by one, by one, by one, by one, because the EQ should be the first thing on the channel strip, right? And in this case, I had an EQ all the way down. So maybe I'll flip that back over here. That's just more work that needs to get done. So when I start a vocal track in my projects, the first thing I'm going to do is throw down my EQ. There should be no reason not to. Number one, it doesn't take up a lot of processing power. Number two, you can do it as you're adding vocal tracks. As soon as I add 5 different audio tracks, let's say down here, right? Look over in my mixer. I have them already in a temporary group. Then we might as well now just add the channel strip, and you'll see all 5 of them get an EQ, right? I mean, how easy is that? Once you add audio tracks, whether you're going to record guitars, you're going to add vocals, you're going to have mics, whatever it is, I'm adding 1, 2, 10, 50 audio tracks. The minute you make them in Logic, they're already in a temporary group because they're highlighted. And then if I put it on the first one, it adds it to all of them. Why not? It's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to slow down your computer. It's not going to do any of that. It's actually one of the most basic plugins in a piece of software. So might as well just get the EQ going right away and not, spend time doing all this signal processing to only find out later you needed it and have to do a lot more work than what's necessary. Again, try to be a little forward thinking and find out what you need ahead of the game so it saves you time and effort down the road in the future. So yeah, I mean, obviously I would want to put an EQ in there and then a compressor. Now, a compressor I would add across the board, though. Different mics, different instruments and voices would have different types of compressors in my world. So that might not be the thing I add right away, like I did with EQ. That might be the thing I add piece by piece because it might be a different plugin for each, but it's still going to be compressing right after the EQ. So then how do I add echo? Well, we already talked about this in a few ways. We can bus it out. We can go ahead and create a bus on that track. In this case, bus 4 is there. And bus 4 travels over here to Space Designer. And if it's not Space Designer, it could be Delay Designer. And if it's not Delay Designer, we can throw it over to something else. Let's send it over to bus. Oh, that's bus 6. Well, bus 9, right? So bus 9 is down here, and let's throw on the echo. So we're going to go down to delay and echo, which is basically what it is, and then hit OK. All right. And now I have a bus 9 over here that I can release some of my signal into. And now, bam, 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 bam. Anyway, So that's how you would do it. You would basically, I would bus it out because then I have more control with this knob here of how much of the signal is being sent out. And then over, of course, in my echo, it would be 100% wet signal, no dry. And then I'd have my adjustments here. And Echo isn't the only plugin that does Echo. There's other plugins that have Echo, like Echo Boy from Soundtoys is really good. Um, there's just a bunch out there that you can use. Whatever you have, might as well use, right? See if it produces that echo effect that you're looking for. Could you put it directly on the track? Sure. But be aware that everything that you did prior to that is going through the echo. An ensemble, a directional mixer, a vocal transformer, everything's going through that. Now, the question is, isn't everything going through that even though you're going out of a bus? Yes. But the difference is I control how much wet and dry signal are involved only with this button, as opposed to using it in the plugin with those two faders up and down and trying to get the mix I want. It's just easier and you gain more control over it here than anywhere else. So that's how you would get echo on Javocals. Javocals. How can I get automation to work with a controller? Wow. Wow. Cool. So let's go into Audio 6 here. Let's solo this guy up. This is just a copy of our MIDI that we bounced out, if you recall, just those, I think, 4 piano notes. Yay. Awesome. Sweet. Awesome. So let's turn on automation. All right. And now I have my fader port here. If I put myself into a right mode, let's see if my fader point, yeah. See if my fader point is going to work as I play back. Let's see. I'm pushing the dial. Nothing's working. So how do I solve this? So this is the key part of Logic. With our Avid Artist Control, it actually syncs up really nicely. Don't have to worry about too much. Like if you want to do volume, you obviously touch the fader. If you want to do pan, you touch the dial. But you don't have to follow in that. When we were using Pro Tools and we were using our controllers, we pretty much were locked into this control defines this parameter. And once we get beyond volume and pan, there were other things that we could do when we had plugins on the track. For instance, if I throw an EQ on there, right now the EQ becomes part of these parameters. So this is where it gets a little more advanced in regards to programming automation for certain parameters. So let's see what we can do here. There's a couple of ways of doing this. The easiest way is Command L, and this is called Controller Learning Assignments. Put it back on here, sorry. All right, so we have a controller, all right, and we're going to learn something. So we got to figure out what we want to learn. In this case, I want to learn volume, right? So once you touch the volume on the track, it actually says, all right, volume is going to be touched on the selected track. And what's our input message? Our input message is going to be the data from the controller. So in order to learn which data is going to be used, we'll go ahead and click learn. And then I'm going to go ahead and touch my fader port. And it's not recognizing my fader port. Oh, I just did it before. That's not very nice. Let's go to learn. That didn't, fader port doesn't want to play nice today. Let's learn. Okay, so that's correct. Just my input message isn't working. Make sure I have it on the right setting. I didn't touch anything on this. Oh, interesting. Maybe it's my project. I'll have to go back through that. Oh, wait, I got something. Something came through. Channel 115. All right, let's see what happens. Got it. Now let's push play in write mode. Maybe it was just a delay. No. Oh, look at that. Interesting. I'm getting some information, but it's not the right information. Let's delete that input message. Let's learn it again. Okay, so there's up. So let's see what happens now when I put itself into touch. It does it a little bit, but the full controller information isn't there. But that's fine. I mean, what I'm trying to show you is that this fader port, when you push buttons and touch faders, it's actually going to write data in there. And all I had to do is assign it the volume control. Let me delete that. Delete that. I'm going to undo all my work there. Let's do it into EQ, because I think that's, I mean, we all know how to automate volume. Most of us use our mouse and our keyboard. But this time, let's automate channel EQ. So we'll go into low cut on and off. How about that? No, that's an on and off. I don't like those. Take that back. We'll do a frequency sweep here. All right. So to actually get that going, we kind of want to go in here and actually touch the parameter so it learns it. I'll do it over here so you can see it. Here we go. And there's our learn. Okay, so there's that. Good. And now our assignment. And I'll push my button here. So now when I go back and I do a playback, I can actually control that parameter of the plugin. There you go, see? Pretty cool, right? So now that actually does take effect in here. Let's see what the frequency, I'm just changing frequency, so it really doesn't matter. But you can see it right here in the EQ plugin as it goes along. That's very slightly changing things. You can see it right here. See? Change, change, change there as well. And that's pretty much all I did. I mean, I used, what does it say? It was a channel frequency Q factor. I was just, changing Q factors, which is not a big deal. To make, I guess, a more defined change, I could probably use a different parameter like this. So we'll use frequency, or you know what, we'll do Q value. No, we'll do frequency. All right, frequency, good. And there's my frequency. And then we'll learn it by touching this. And then we'll go back and play back and see how that affects it. And we'll do playback in touch mode. Okay, so changes aren't tremendously made to this, but if I do a cut here or some sort of change, let's see. You can see now the EQ curve switching every so often, right? Moving just slightly through my automation. Look at it go. Woo, pretty. Look at it move. It's like it's dancing. Now, we're going to use this because we want to do certain effects that are going to change the way the signal sounds. But to control it, there are other ways as well. Let's get into a bigger way of using controller assignments. If you go into Logic Pro and you go into control surfaces, there actually is this huge, whoop, nope, where is it? No, it's not showing me the, where did it go? The zones? Well, here's my first problem. Let's see. Maybe this is why my thing isn't working. It had to scan some new stuff. Ooh, look at this. So I can scan for controllers. This is a Presonus. So we'll scroll down to good old Presonus. Did I miss it? Oh, it's not here. I know. Click add and record. Right. Cancel. Is it already here? Well, I don't have recording light on, so I don't know what that is. So Personas isn't being shown here, but maybe I don't have a driver. Maybe something happened. It worked before. It's kind of crazy. It would be somewhere around here. Roland, Yamaha, Hexler. No. Okay. I don't want to use that at all. We'll get rid of that. The other one I do have, and someone did ask this question as well, is um, how do you use an iPad or an iPhone? Let's see if I go over here to my questions. I think it's down here somewhere, actually. Oh, there it is. How do you use your iPhone or iPad to link up so that you can use it as a control surface? Well, we actually did this very early on in our lessons where we actually, I don't have the iPad here near me, but we used the software for Logic Pro that's in the App Store, the mobile version of that. I do want to go in, and while we're here, we might as well talk about it, right? Where is my App Store? There it is. No, it's not App Store. There we go. So Logic and Pro Tools. Yeah, no, cancel. Logic and Pro Tools have this controller app that utilizes. I'm going to say Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. I guess it all depends on what you're working with, and that. Oh, why didn't it go into it? App Store. Thank you. It allows you to now take a mobile device, Logic Pro X. Let's just see what's in here for now. And there's courses and all sorts of stuff and puzzles and games. And we actually have some of these, by the way, on our iPad. I sometimes hand it off to new students that want to learn a little bit about Logic X before we get in there. It's just give them the whole iPad and say, hey, go explore. Let's see, controller. Let's do control. All right. Well, you know what it is? It's probably because I'm using my laptop instead of my iPhone or my iPad, which is what it was designed to do. So it actually will allow you then to go in and control elements of Logic or Pro Tools, depending on what you're doing, remotely. And we actually did a little bit of this in school before we were able to leave. It's called Logic Remote. And let me just click on it so you guys can see, and I'll show you in my camera. That's what it's called. Oh, hi. Logic Remote. There it is. So, yeah, it's not available on laptop version, right? So this is a portable controller for Logic. Allows you to use, like I said, Bluetooth technology to control certain elements. You actually can do automation using this. You can also do mixing. You can put yourself in cycle mode and play, like I said, transport controls. And there's actually an electric grand piano. You can turn your phone into a MIDI device. So how cool is that? You don't even need the AKG, though there is something to be said for something physical to type into. Sorry, not the AKG. It's the Korg. There is something to be said to having like a physical thing to play piano on. I mean, I don't even like this. I would need a full scale 88 key piano in order to play something that I would want. But sometimes we don't have the luxury of having that full scale piano. So yeah, I mean, you don't even just have to get a external controller. You can actually utilize a phone, or you can utilize a iPad, or you can utilize Bluetooth technology to control this. I don't know why it wasn't coming up from my. Let me just see my preferences here. Yeah, my Nano Key's in there as being a MIDI controller, but for some reason, just a MIDI controller, not as a actual controller like my Personas would be. Well, nonetheless, I did it a little bit so you could see it. It worked for the most part. And obviously, the more things that are involved with your controller, the more things you'll be able to control. But that's how you would basically set up. By the way, again, the quick key Command L is how you would learn the assignment. So if you wanted it again to just be volume, just touch the volume. All of a sudden, the parameter is now volume on the selected track. The input message would be what you touch on your controller. And then, of course, then we could, yeah, my buttons are working, but my fader for some reason is not. So maybe it's a USB thing. Yeah, that's weird. Shift is working. All these are working. The buttons are all working, which is interesting. Can I go in and out of touch, right, and latch? And the answer is no to that. Yeah, so my controller section is working great. My transport, rather, all actually becomes automatable pieces. So as you can see, as it's jumping on the screen, I'm pushing the buttons, changing the parameters of the volume automation. So Control L will bring you there, and then you select what you want as a parameter, and then you go ahead and type on your controller what you want as your controlled piece, your dial, your fader, whatever it is, and then it'll assign it to that. Once you put yourself in right, latch, or touch mode, you'll be able to do it in real time. So that's the more advanced way of doing automation outside of using a mouse and a keyboard. It's also a lot of stuff I just said that was kind of roundabout answering it, but I did end up giving you the specifics. How can a multipressor work on my mix? Well, we did talk about we did talk about just having a multipressor. You could see that the compressors that I'm using inside of each of these tracks is not a multipressor. What we have not addressed is the main master output. And multipressors, to me, unless you have this really dynamic mix of instruments like a drum sub, where you're going to have hi-hats up in the 5 to 10K range and cymbals up there, you're going to have the low end of the kick down in the 50 to 100 range. You're going to have the floor tom in the 100 to 200 range, the snare, which is snapping anywhere between 2 to 5K range. There's so much going on in a drum mix that to compress the mix, you're going to need something that is able to identify specific ranges of the mix. So just to review what a multipressor is, just to start, and I'll put it down here on my master track for now because I don't have a drum mix. It's in Dynamics, and it's down here in multipressor. So as we reviewed back in the plugin work of Logic, a multipressor is 4 separate compressors in one plugin. So each one of these, 1, 2, 3, and 4, are compressors. And each compressor is focusing on a very specific range of frequencies. So as I mentioned, you know, your kick, your floor, all that would be down here in 1. Your middle range, maybe your toms or any other percussionary instruments that reside in this range, 200 to 1K. In your 1K to 7K range is what this looks like. Man, you're talking about a lot of stuff. Definitely the snare, maybe the slap of the kick from the beater to the drum, maybe some low-end cymbals. And then once you get above 7K, you're talking about your high-end cymbals. And you can see some of the presets in this plugin. What the hell was that? Something loose on my, oh, it's just my thing. You can see in the presets of this that there are a number of different, what do I want to say? A number of different presets that really describe drums and also entire mixes. So you can see there's nothing like super specific. Yeah, maybe a bright guitar is very specific, but the rest of this is all about the mix and a drum mix. So that's why I usually say, look at the presets. They usually tell you something about their use. The way they're described, the way they're categorized. There's a reason why they do that. And in this, you can see, you know, a lot of it has to do with having a mix, and a lot of it has to do with having a mix of drums. So let's go into punchy drums. I've used this before, and let's just take a look at what happens. So you can see the ranges are actually redefined a little bit. It looks like there's just a touch of compression here between 20 hertz and about 150. And there's just a little push down there on the mid lows. So that's around the 320 range, so 150 to 320. Then there's a little push down there on 320 all the way up to 4400 hertz. And then a slight push down up on the highs. And this is what we consider punchy drums. So, what is a good way of describing what punchy means? It means low end, very clicky, very in your heart, in your chest kind of feel. You could see that we pretty much left alone that whole low end. We're not using any compression. We're letting that run wild. And then as a result, we're actually going to control those mid lows, those mids highs, and of course the highs. You can see we're reducing the volume, reducing ranges of these low mid all the way up to high highs, and we're leaving the low end to kind of run wild. And if those were recorded properly, this would be a really good way of getting that thud into the chest, into those sub bass speakers. So you can use this for electronic, you could use it for regular drums, just a lot of different ways you can mess around with it. I would also actually argue to use a multipressor when having a room mic. So a room mic's purpose is to sit in a room and capture the sounds that are happening. If you have a room mic for a drum kit, it's picking up every frequency. It's picking up the kick, it's picking up the snare, it's picking up the hi-hats and the cymbals and the floor tom, everything. So you'd kind of want something that allows you to focus in on certain frequencies in order to get a result that you're looking for. So to answer that, a multipressor, just by its nature, will is several different compressors that have a very specific focus on a range of frequencies. So then you can add more control or less control to those ranges, giving you a final result you might be looking for. Here was a fun one. What type of plugins can I use for rock and metal voices? I probably reworded that a little better, but for the most part, we're talking about more edgy vocals. There's a lot of different things out there, and also obviously depends on the artist and how they want it to sound. Um, there are several ways. We actually did some stuff here on the vocal tracks, if you recall, where we added like pitch correction and ensemble. So when we did this and we played it back, right, there was some pitch correction done, and we will talk about flex pitch, probably not today, tomorrow. But we were able to, what it shows here is an actual copy, an exact copy of this track went onto this track. And then what we did to the second track is what really defined what the final result is going to be. And we had to make big changes to this second track because we don't just want a duplicate of another one. There's no purpose in that. So what I've always found for the genre outside of rap and hip hop, which is very specific nowadays on how they mix and create vocal mixes, is for, let's say, rock and metal and country and all that. There's a lot of the same procedures that we would do for everything, in early recording. We already talked about let's say the foundation plugins of EQ and compression, right? You would definitely need some of that just to gain control, to maybe expand the dynamic range, and of course to get the best possible performance to sound great. So then the next layers, as we mentioned, would be things like pitch control. We actually did a delay on this one as well. We can always bust out the delay. We actually showed the differences between bussing out and not bussing out. What other things can be used? Well, depends on who you are, depends on the music, but let's just say for rock, there's a lot of reverb, there's a lot of harmonics, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of bringing volume and gain up to the very edge of where it sounds good to where it's not sounding good. Some rock vocals or even metal vocals over compress things to get that edge, meaning they're creeping on the very edge of distortion. So you're really pushing the boundaries of what it is. Yeah, I mean, I've noticed, even with this, let's see this. And as cool as that is, there's still a lot of holes there. It's very Swiss cheesy, meaning there's a lot of room for more flavor, more stuff. So what we're going to do is we can add in other types of filtering type plugins like Spectral Gates, some modulation stuff like choruses. Choruses are used a lot in rock and metal, believe it or not. It sounds like it shouldn't be, but it does. Slow Asha vocal backup. So this was one. So you can almost hear like there's a doubling effect. And one of the things that metal lead singers use, besides the little bit of edgy distortion, compression flavor, is that they will double up on some of these vocal backups. So to be able to go in and kind of fill in the gaps, fill in the holes, really allows you this much fuller mix when it comes to your plugins. Let's see what we got here. Like I said, I add delay sometimes to fill in those gaps. That is something we could do. Push play on this. Right. So the doubling of that vocal track over and over again kind of fills in what happens in between the signals. Let's see what else we got here. People do use flangers, and people do use other phaser type singers, ring shifters, again, all depending on what you're looking for. So this is a cool effect. So what a lot of people will do is they'll make a copy like we did on a second track. They'll leave their first track fairly unaffected. They'll use their basic EQ and compression and get it to where they want. And then they'll make that duplicate track like we've always talked about, whether it be recording a brand new thing, which is what I would recommend to do, and then adding harmonies, adding LFOs and things to kind of fill in and swirl around and kind of make it sound a little more full. I think one of the big things initial engineers have trouble with is making a vocal mix sound full. Like, how do the people on the radio and how do major artists sound so good? And they basically try to recognize that there's an engineering thing going on in the background. There's something someone's doing, and it's not the artist that's making the vocal mix sound that good. This is where you come in. This is where your time to shine is, where your name associated with the production of that album, associated with the making of that track comes in. Your creative thought process. What is missing? What needs to get done? And then how do I achieve that? All of those steps that you take as an engineer are going to end up being the thing that separates you out. Right. Like I said, there's a bunch of things out there that people use. You can try to mimic that, but don't mimic. Don't be a parrot. Be a pathfinder, a trailblazer. Be someone that does new stuff because you know how things work. You know where to put them technically, and you spend the time and put in the effort to achieve that thought. Be creative. I unfortunately can't teach you how to be creative. I've always said it. But I can teach you where things are. And when you finally have an idea, like what if I made it sound like it was underwater? How do you achieve that? Well, you can use filters. And if you're not exactly sure what filter, maybe you'll have to hunt and peck for it. And then once I have the filter on, how do I get it to that point where I like it? And then how do I move that? And how do I combine that and blend that with this particular track? And like I said, I can't give you a brochure, a user manual to do that because every single artist is going to be different. Every single mix is going to be different. And goes down to the mic, for crying out loud. So again, rock and metal vocals, these are the typical things they use. They'll use choruses. They'll use compressors. They might add a touch of distortion. They'll double and triple up on the performance, meaning they'll record the same part 3 or 4 times and blend it together. A lot of different strategies to that. But again, it's about what you're looking for. All right. How does too much compression affect vocals? Ooh, all right. So let's do it. I mean, it's not very difficult. We got a track here that we can use. It's my little ooh-oohs. And so my compressor right now, let's take a look at the settings. We have a vintage FET on there. It looks like just a slight bit, maybe 3 decibels of volume is being added to it. So because of my parameters of threshold, ratio, knee, attack, release, I'm actually getting about 3 decibels of extra sound out of this. But let's push that limit. Let's see what happens when I touch the threshold. So I'm going to go ahead and push play. Or not. There we go. So I'm going to push the threshold up. Pushing the threshold up really doesn't give me my volume, so it's pushing the threshold down. Again, these are the steps you should be taking. If you didn't know what threshold was, go in, put something in a loop, push play, and play with these parameters. If by definition you don't know what it is, it's time to start going in and figuring that out. So I'm now going to push the threshold down, which means every signal that goes over the threshold is going to be given the effect of compression. And you can see as I'm moving the threshold down, my volume is increasing tenfold. It went from -12 to -9. Now we're going up to -6. Let's keep pushing it down. And I'm really pushing it up there. Now, I don't know if you can hear it from here, and I'll put the mic closer to the speaker. But now that I've dropped my threshold tremendously, which means a lot of the signal is going over the threshold and a lot of the signal is getting compressed, let's take a listen to what it's doing to the vocals. So what you're hearing is actually like some air almost inside of that vocal track. You're hearing like my breath a little bit. What I'm going to do is actually just put a fade on the front end of this because it seems to be popping in and I don't want to pop in. Just a slight fade there. There we go. And maybe a slight fade on the back end. There we go. Right there is good. And it's not giving me my fade. That's because I'm in a pack take folder. So what are we going to do? Oh, I know what we're going to do. We're going to do this. I'm going to get it faded in. Nope. Didn't like that. We're going to actually flatten it out. And now let's see if I can add my fade. There she is. Okay. So here's the, there we go. It's much smoother. So now that I add a bunch of compression to this, because it's, anything over -34 is getting compressed. Let's see what my ratio has to do with this. So I heard a little, air and breath inside the signal. So what does ratio do now that I'm getting, a definite change in volume and signal over here? So you can see as I push the ratio up, my volume actually went down a little bit, which means I'm compressing more. But it's even more so down because I'm not adding a lot of compression at all. So the more ratio that goes into it, you hear that air at the back end? It's almost like I put an F at the end of it. That's a ooh. There's so much air now involved in this. And that's just me messing around with the parameters. And once I pulled this back down to where it was, right around a 3-to-1, the air kind of went out of it a little bit. And for the most part, that was just these two parameters. Threshold and ratio is really what makes up the bulk of my compressor. After that, the makeup gain has to, readjust to balance out the act. And the attack and release is all about speed. The knee is hard or soft compression. But right now, we are in a vintage vocal preset. So whatever these were works for me right now. I just wanted to see what the differences were. Going back to your question, what does too much compression effect do? Well, it actually depends on what was recorded. In this case, it added a lot of air, a lot of breathiness to my signal, and obviously added a lot of volume to my signal. So is that what I wanted? That's the question I have to ask myself when I stop touching the parameters. Is what I just did the direction I want to go in, or am I making it worse? Am I not doing what exactly I wanted to do as a final result for this piece? Did it work well with the other instruments and other tracks in this project? And there's still a little oomph at the back end here. Maybe I can increase my fade in the back end. Yeah, that minimized it a little bit. Or, just technically speaking, we can just shave it off because that air back there is a little crazy. going to shape my my fade. I don't know if you guys know, but you can shape your fade. Once you create your fade, and let's just get rid of the fade for a moment. Once you create your standard fade like that, whoops. Once you create your standard fade like this, if you go into the middle of the fade, you can actually bend it. And that just changes the speed of the fade. So it could be a very quick, sharp angle down, and that gives you a different result. So if I wanted to really kind of leave this part alone, but really drop it off at the very end, that's what I would do. Let's hear what that sounds like. And literally the airiness, the oof is gone. So any airiness that's left now is going to be in the actual signal. I'm not catching anything off the back. I'm not worried about these weird artifacts being left around or a reverb tail or any of that stuff. It is actually really clean now. I was able to take my fade at the front end, keep it from popping in, and then take my fade at the back and really ramp up that fade when it gets closer to the end so I didn't catch any of the air from the compressor. And again, this is all a balancing act. Once I make one adjustment, I have to go back and listen to it a few times to make sure it didn't affect anything else. And it did. My compressor, when I dropped my threshold and added more ratio to the compression, it actually added a lot more air. But then that added these weird sounds after the signal, and I didn't want that. So I have to now make adjustments. Play it back, listen to it a few times, make sure it's what I'm looking for. And it's perfect right now. It's exactly what I was looking for, to add a little more intensity, air, space, volume without adding anything into other pieces of the puzzle here. And then I can play it with the rest of the stuff. And so that track probably needs a little work as well. But the compressor really, can add characteristics, can add color, can add obvious volume, and you can always adjust that and use that makeup gain parameter to rebalance the equation, as we always say. Do I want to get into any other questions today? It's already 11 o'clock, and we'll go through this. Why do you? Oh, look, we did this one already. Why do you add the EQ first but don't do anything with it? Yeah, I mentioned that. Ooh, we can just start crossing some stuff off here. I'll actually have my iPad out tomorrow. How about that? I'll go charge my iPad, and we'll actually address this question specifically for the iPad and Logic Control. And then we'll show you how to use Logic Control with automation and control here in Logic, the program itself with the iPad as a wireless controller. Anybody have any questions on what we covered today? Like I said, fairly comprehensive. Some of it's a little repetitive, but I think the more we answer these questions and the more we talk about the same stuff, the better you got at last tests overall. Your average went way up. But like I said, the more we do this and the more I show you and the more comfortable you feel with knowing what everything does, and then eventually when you get to sit down and work with Logic, then you'll be able to do these things. And I commend for the people who are actually doing Logic work at their house and working on projects. Like I said, I got 2 or 3 projects right now I'm working on. Might as well, right? Might as well stay busy and stay sharp and stay focused with the software and the audio industry. And go out there and look for those jobs, man. There are people out there looking to do stuff. You don't have to leave your house necessarily. You don't have to risk anything. It's just a matter of I'll do a project for you, and then maybe down the road you'll have a much bigger project when things go back to normal, and or maybe get paid for it. Might as well spend your time making some money. I don't suggest day trading. I suggest doing stuff that you're comfortable with. And I think a lot of you are comfortable with doing post-production audio. I actually had asked people that if they were interested in doing some post-production on some tracks I had. There were a few of you that actually contacted me, and I sent you out a few tracks to kind of mess around with. That's one of the projects I'm currently working on. I obviously did the post-production on them and sent them off, but I wanted to see what your take on those were and see what you would have done and what you could have, what you were listening to versus what I was listening to. And it's good to see some people, seeing the same things I'm seeing, hearing the same things I'm hearing, which means you're getting it. That's all I care about. I want to make sure you're getting it. Tests don't concern me. Projects concern me. And there is no projects this week. So again, thanks everybody for coming in today. Appreciate your time and your effort throughout the week. Make sure you go back and finish any past projects you may have not completed or taken any tests you have not taken. And we will be back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. for some more of these questions. I'll update this masterclass question list for you on the stream. And if you haven't done gym, do gym. And I think that's it. Enjoy this nice day, but get work done. Be diligent. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. Later. Holla.